Welcome back, gentle comrades, for another
Comrades.
segment of Marxism Monday, where two non Marxists take a look at critical theory. We are working through One Dimensional Man by Herbert Marcuse, and today we are on chapter 4. And boy, a lot of stuff going on in chapter 4.
Chapter 4 is interesting. Yeah.
lot of stuff. So yeah, why don't you take the reins?
I actually said this on the tweet, as it were, that I think this chapter is really evidence of, in some ways, the degree to which people on the left either don't read their own books or they are cynically living in the inversion of them, right?
Yeah.
And like this chapter 4, right? I'm sorry, I have my title ready to go here, but the title is
Closing of the Discourse, was it?
Closing of the Discourse. It's about the control of speech through controlling the meanings of words.
Right, the manipulation of language.
The manipulation of language.
Interesting.
About limiting the discourse by limiting which words can be spoken and what their meanings are. I mean,
right.
And this is not Marcuse saying go out and do that, although I think elsewhere he kind of does. But in this text, he's saying this is the tool of the capitalist machine is to control the language, right?
Right. Now let's spend a few minutes on this. Let's just give some examples of how this is being done in modern society. Now he's talking about this as something that you need to watch out for, right? He's giving a warning here. He's saying like this is a tool of keeping you essentially a slave, right?
Yeah.
But we see it all the time now. But where is it coming from now? Well, certainly from the capitalist machine, we see that too, but hugely from the political left. Redefinitions of words, racism being a very big one, right? Like racism literally just got redefined of that previously people understood to be some type of quality of a person where they thought there was like some real difference in ontological value between people because of, say, a contingent accident, like their skin color, to give like the metaphysical analysis. That's what people traditionally understood racism to be. But over the past couple of words, we got a redefinition of it by people who are largely on this sort of camp that kind of arose from Marcuse to say that it is the product of disparities and systems, right? Where you can literally be a racist just by being part of a system, right? Systems now are racist, not people, right?
Exactly.
And the reason this is so manipulative is because our culture, rightfully so, bears a heavy stigma on actual racism, right? Like nobody wants to be called that because we all understand, thankfully, that like it's not good to be racist, right?
Right.
So if you can redefine that and then hit people with that term, they tend to submit, right? It tends to be a very, very effective rhetorical strategy for trying to silence somebody because of the stigma or the shame that is associated with that. But what most people miss is exactly what Marcuse is exposing of how it has been, the language has been manipulated to manipulate the population. What do you think?
Okay, 100%. One aside first I want to do is like that juxtaposing of the left and the capitalist machine, right? Is like, this is the thing where like I think Marcuse underestimates the power of his own argument to act as if even his own critical theory is going to be immune to being incorporated into the consumerist machine was naive, right? Like ultimately, like the breakdown of meaningful speech, the breakdown of all identities, is really useful to making people define themselves by corporate brand identities, right? Do you see what I mean? And so,
dude, one more interruption. In the fitness industry, I know major people, which I spend a lot of time in, former colleagues of mine went from selling courses on fat loss to courses on curing your racism.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
This is not a joke. Like I saw this happen in real time. It was nuts.
If you make my traditional Christian, American, Muslim, whatever identity, right? If you define it as systematically racist, okay, and thereby it's bad, okay, I'm untethered now, right? Like who I am is up for grabs, right? And Nike is happy to tell me who I am now.
That's right.
Right. Do you know what I mean? So I really think they, Brenda just brought up like what it means to be fat has been redefined. Right. Like I think like this, like people like Marcuse missed that his own argument would tell us, right, that even like the hardcore critical stuff, like his critical theory is itself going to become a tool in the manipulation of people for the sake of consumer addictions. By his own argument, we should expect that, and he seems to miss that, right?
Right. But the brilliant thing here is the exposition that one of the best ways, one of the cleverest ways to manipulate people is by manipulating language. That
Yes,
is
exactly.
a core theme.
And really through a kind of philosophical nominalism, right? So he brings up operationalism.
I was going to say we got a lot of concepts in this chapter that I
Yeah.
want to talk about.
It's interesting. Yeah, it's interesting, right? I mean, and you're like, man, okay, you're right. Yeah. So he brings up operationalism and behaviorism again, which I think back in chapter 2, that was one of his stalking horses. He's saying that reductive materialist understanding of human cognition is itself very useful for manipulation, right?
Right. And this is really interesting because for a couple of reasons. One is he not only critiques that, but he takes a couple swipes at positivism as well. And like you have to kind of like wonder about this guy, because it's like, I don't like what was his like general transcendent view? Was he an atheist? Was he a staunch atheist?
Yeah, well,
but
I don't know.
He's clearly taking shots at materialism, right? He uses words like the transcendent, but then never really quite defines what he means by that. So like on one hand, you would, if you were just reading these couple of pages, you might think that this is like a Thomist, right? On 1 minute, but then you read 5 other pages and you're like, well, what's good? You see what I'm saying, right?
I suspect, in the dirty medieval picnics that he had in mind, there would have been some Gaia worship or something going on.
That's what I'm saying, like maybe some like broad spiritual pagan or something.
Pagan or something like that, yeah. But I mean, so and what's important on that operationalism bit for him, the idea that the behavioralism bit is that there is no, on that view, deeper fact of what cognition is, and thereby what a concept is, than the behaviors it affects, right? So using the racism example, there's nothing that racism means over and above the behavior that the word racism elicits. Like that's the kind of limited materialist, reductivist behaviorist view that Marcuse is so worried about, right? And so now, like his examples, like there's no fact of the matter of what democracy is, but what people in democracies can be made to do, right? Because we don't think there are actual concepts that are grounded in anything but behavior, right? And so, what it means to be democratic is whatever you can get people to do by using the word democratic, right? And so he then sees it is, once you have that materialist view of human nature, then language is just one more tool used to manipulate human beings to do what you want, right? And I tell you, you can. This is in Hobbes' Leviathan. This is absolutely in Hobbes' Leviathan, right? Is that humans cognition is just something a machine could do. There's no deeper fact about it than that, and thereby we'll just build a machine that will play on people's behaviors. That's it, right? And so then that's why what we have, I think this is one of the brilliant parts of the chapter, is he says, look, we just speak in these empty tautologies now, right? Like you just, if you
love
ask
is love, baby.
Love is love, man. Yeah, right. No, exactly.
Science is real.
Science is real, right? It's just empty tautologies, because what matters is not the meanings of the words. The words don't mean anything on this view. All that matters is the effect of the words on behavior. Period. Right. And I think part of what he's doing here, and this is one of the frustrating things about Marcuse, is he's this philosophical potpourri. There's not so he's a lot of Marx with some Freud sprinkled in.
You're right,
with some Heidegger sprinkled in, and even some classical Platonism sprinkled in here.
But where's the systematic interconnected unity?
It's like he's like a convenient buffet borrower of people, right?
Yep,
and I think much of this chapter he learned from Heidegger and Heidegger's notion of idle talk. And Heidegger's view is that our ordinary self, this they self that we walk around in unreflectively, inauthentically, is mainly built around this notion of idle talk. We just sort of say what is said. Like we just sort of we just repeat the stock phrases that we've been given by the commons without really thinking what it means, because it just helps us, it's kind of maneuver our way through the world, right? Like every morning, you see Bob at the water cooler, how you doing, Roy? And Roy's, oh, I'm great. Even though Roy just murdered his children or something. It's like, it's just what you say, right? It's just what you say, right? And so I think what Marcuse is doing is picking up on this notion of idle talk from Heidegger, is that it kind of dominates common speech. And he's saying, yeah, our idle talk is a bunch of empty tautologies that we just say. And these are mostly foisted on us by like marketing campaigns now and political campaigns now to become just the going tautologies that we just utter because it just keeps everybody doing the things that we want them to do.
That's
right.
correct.
Like speech has been made trivial and empty, right?
Mhm.
Because we think of ourselves as machines, right? And just ripe for manipulation. Okay. And I think the behavior of the left in recent years is a great example of this, as you pointed out really well. Yeah.
Mhm. Right.
Right.
Yeah. Right. This is certainly, and I don't want to deny that his critiques of the capitalist machine aren't bad, because obviously corporations do this too. But the hilarious thing is corporations are now doing it in conjunction with the leftist ideology, right? That's the most ironic thing of all.
because he brought up, like, the theme of this book is like, guys, read your Hegel. Reason is cunning, right?
Mhm.
Okay, it can incorporate almost anything, right? The Enlightenment is cunning, okay. But it seems like Marcuse did not envision it applying to his position too, right?
Yeah.
And maybe in 64 he's writing this, 63 he's writing this.
Mhm.
This really was an interruption and transgressive to the system, right, that he's critiquing. But it has been thoroughly imbued into the very, very power structures he's trying to critique, and so now it's a parody of itself, right?
Yeah.
Like reading this book right now, it's all like it's like, this is silly, right?
Mhm.
Because like, how can you not see that this is what your people are doing? Well, because he didn't see it happen.
Yeah, he didn't see it in the 60s, of course.
Yeah,
right.
but I do think there's a kind of myopia in Marcuse here, in that he's not like, okay, like reason's really cunning, the Enlightenment's really cunning, but I've outsmarted it with this. No, man, like your thing's going to be sucked into it too.
Yeah, absolutely. So he's critiquing these like really nominalism, right? The broad camps within nominalism, we could say. But he's still admitting that their influence has been really significant on human behavior. So he's not a behaviorist, but he's still saying, like, no, look, we still can manipulate outcomes and people by manipulating language, right? So I think we have to kind of draw that distinction. He's not admitting that behaviorism is true. He thinks it's false. However, its influence has kind of almost made it true. You know what I mean? Right? That's kind of
and this is where he's showing his, like, I'm in a feud between Hegel and Marx. I'm picking Hegel, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Because this is kind of the Hegelian idealist piece here, is that Hegel, has this, is kind of famously thinks like humans get a sort of vote in who they are. Like our going self-conception kind of becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy, right? And so in as much as we think of ourselves in behaviorist terms, we'll sort of live up to that low expectation, right? And do it, right? And so, in as much as the university has told people behaviorism is true, they quit asking like deeper questions, right? And, they become more easily, manipulated by behaviorism itself, right? And like, this is one of the Hegelian like theories of history. Every moment of history is sort of a self-fulfilling prophecy, confirming at first, right, its own prejudices about what human nature is, ultimately to be like, run into like reality or like get in the way of it, right? So at this point in history, it does seem like we've prophesized ourselves to be, merely machines, right? And we're living down to that expectation.
Yeah, that's a great way of putting it. Do you want to say anything more about concepts and behaviorism in general, or should we save that for our intro on philosophy of mind?
Let's save it.
Okay, because there's a lot we could say about that.
Oh God, yeah. I mean, and I tell you, once again, I had not read this book for years and years and years. I had forgotten how much philosophy of mind is in the background of this.
This chapter really is his chapter on philosophy of mind right here, right? So like, and exactly. I think we could go with him from the way we think about this I think we go with him a pretty long ways, right? I mean, he's right. Like, behaviorism faces horrible issues of self-defeat, right? I mean, concepts have to be determinate and exact in their semantic content. Otherwise, like, we wouldn't really even understand the sentences we're using to make the argument to begin with, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So, like, there's any number of retorsion-y moves you can make to show that behaviorism is just necessarily false, right?
Exactly.
The question then is, how is it that we've almost fooled ourselves into thinking it might be true and then live down to those expectations? That's the question. Right?
This is an amazing thing. Yeah. It's an amazing thing that human beings do seem to get a vote in what we are, in a way, right? Which shows that, we're pretty special, right?
Right.
Like a beach clam's self-conception makes no difference in what it is, right? It gets no vote, right? And I think one of the fun parts of this chapter is, he talks about like these oxymorons, that are just rife in the popular culture of day, like um, safe and luxurious bomb shelter, right? He's right. That makes no damn sense whatsoever. There could be nothing safe and luxurious about Holocausts, right? Like nuclear Holocaust. But yeah, it must have been like on, in magazine ads at the time, because he's, and there are all sorts.
I wonder what he would think about the Twitter threads about a biological female penis.
Exactly. Yeah. No. I mean, exactly. I mean, if he's consistent, he should say that's double speak. That cannot make sense, and it only makes sense if you take it out of this other context of a real human context, right? Or I was thinking, like, like I've heard someone the other day talking about, being happy with your body as it naturally is, meaning fat, right? So now, like fat in nature. Well, no, like nature is not naturally fat.
Right.
Okay. Like that's not nature, right? Or like just think of what's been done to the word nature, so that it can broker all these contradictions to our very nature, right? And so I think you can see all these examples of where we've taken literal contradictions and made them cliches for the purposes of just manipulating behavior.
That's exactly right. I mean, just go political issue after political issue for the past, I don't know, as long as I've been alive, certainly, right? Especially the social issues, major social issues.
Yeah, exactly. Major social issues, right? And so you can come up with endless lists of these Orwellian newspeak, and and they change from political era to the next. They change from left to right, but this idea that we're going to take literal contradictions and just say them enough that they begin to become behaviorally significant.
Right. And the scary thing is, and this is why I'm not that optimistic about the gender nonsense, right? Because people see it as when it first comes into sight, people are like, that's so crazy, right?
Yeah.
But people have thought that before about things that we don't really. If we think deeply about it now, we think, oh yeah, that doesn't really make sense. But we were kind of born into the culture where the contradiction already became a cliche. You see what I'm saying, right?
Yeah.
So everyone, the first time somebody pretended, as many people still pretend, that a man could just think himself into a woman, everyone thought that's just nonsense. We need to raise the walls at the asylum, and Pat Flynn agrees. However. Right. But however, already within the past 5 years, we can see now how the cultural tides have changed. Why? Not because of advancements in any argument. God forbid. God knows that isn't the case. And a lot of other people aside from God knows that that's the case, right? But just because it's been repeated and asserted often enough, and the punishments in academia or in society for denying this otherwise obvious truth have increased, and language has continued to be manipulated. And in fact, there was just a paper that came out, a good one. I'll have to link it. Maybe I can grab it here next time you chat, Jim. And it's a researcher at Stanford. He's a geneticist, and he just published the paper. Here, I can find it in 2 seconds. It's relevant to our conversation, and it's on. I was going to send it to you, but then I sent it to my wife. Yeah, it's called "Inhuman Sex is Binary and Immutable," right? Duh. But what's amazing about this, let me just read the disclaimer of this paper.
That had to be discovered.
The fact this even had to be put in here. Here's the disclaimer. I am not a tenured faculty member and have no job security. I am well aware that my career prospects could be jeopardized by this essay. I also write from a perspective not widely shared that anyone who pledges allegiance to any political party or ideology cannot rightly call himself a scientist. Political and ideological loyalties, in my view, violate the epistemic practices scientists are supposed to follow. So there's two. Go ahead. Yeah.
What is that person's name?
The paper is called. His name is Georgy K. Marinov. He's a postdoctoral research scholar at the Department of Genetics, Stanford University School of Medicine. So
So let me say this, Georgie, and I hope you hear it, man. You're a real man.
I'm putting in the show notes. You are a real man, dude. Right.
And Georgie, I bet you have to carry your nuts around in a cart behind you, man. That's awesome.
Bravo, brother.
I hope all of our people go find this guy on Patreon and get him paid
before he gets fired.
Before he gets fired. I think we need to reach out to Georgie and have him on the show, man.
Georgie, you are welcome anytime.
Let's
as soon
do
as you're canceled, my friend, you have a home here in
Let's
Philosophy
go.
of the People.
Let's go.
Right?
Yeah, exactly. You
But
can have my spot, Georgie. Yeah.
There's two remarkable things about this that are related to Marcuse. One is that a paper on this even needs to be published, right? I mean, it's just ridiculous, right? Of course, right? Something that we've all known as a basic, undeniable fact for all of human history is suddenly now something that needs to be argued for. Ridiculous. And then it needs to be disclaimed like that. Now, I want to say that, like, the whole male, female, gender thing is actually a properly philosophical question more than it is a scientific question. However, once you get your philosophical anthropology straight, which only takes 5 minutes of having your eyes open, all the scientific research confirms that philosophical anthropology, and always has, and people have always known that. And then, of course, you have the mere clever sophists who come out and try and give their sophistries about weird chromosomal abnormalities, like that makes any sort of significant difference. It doesn't, right? But it's enough to fool people.
Tough cases make bad law.
Indeed, tough cases make bad law. So, anyways, I had to bring that up because it's just so relevant to what we're talking about.
Well, and so what has happened there is it's just the stock phrases, love is love, or I can be who I want, whatever, right? Have been said enough to operantly condition a generation of people. Okay. And of course, humans are more than Pavlovian dogs, but we are Pavlovian dogs up to a point. Like, we are subject to operant conditioning. That is very clear, right? It's called Marine Corps boot camp, right?
Spot on.
It works really well. Okay. We can be indoctrinated. We need to, by the way, we need to be indoctrinated. Like one of the great human innovations is our ability for conformity. Like it is really, conformity is very important to us, right? So we are subject to a pre-rational operant conditioning. We need it. Right. So if you do say something long enough, you will circumvent the rational faculties of a human being. Right. And if you reward them for saying the same thing, and you reward them for behaving in a certain way on the cue of your saying that, it will work if you catch them early and you do it enough and it becomes ubiquitous and there's reward. I mean, we are, not just Pavlovian dogs, but we are, a stage of human is Pavlovian. Right.
And this is such an important point, because it's not a matter of whether you're going to be indoctrinated, or for even parents, whether you're going to indoctrinate your kids. It's just a matter of what are you going to indoctrinate them in. Now, we could argue about whether indoctrination is an unfairly loaded term, right? Rather than just, I don't know,
education,
the general condition of upbringing or education or whatever, right?
The rudiments of education. Yeah.
But like the joke, sometimes people make this critique of religion. It's like, I'm not going to bring my kids up with any indoctrination. They raise them as like a Portland atheist. It's like, man, you just gave them a heavy dose of indoctrination.
Well, you're gonna make them memorize multiplication tables, I hope.
Right. Yeah. Or maybe not, because
maybe not now.
Yeah. 1 + 1 can equal 3 these days. Yeah. So,
no, and thinking, go back to Orwell. What was the the big moment in Orwell is O'Brien insists that the protagonists say, what was it, 7 + 7 = 9, right? And
that's right.
It means what I said it means, and he was resistant to conditioning, right?
And then we have our 2 minutes of hate, and we see that in society. I mean, I've often said that I prefer Huxley to Orwell, but Orwell was spot on in so many things as well, right? And we have our 2 minutes of hate. Kyle Rittenhouse just got his 40,000 hours of hate.
And so what I love about this is like we were taught this by Marcuse, right? You know what I mean? Like, and so there's always the question: have they just not read their own book, or are they cynically applying their own book? Like, that's always, I think that's an interesting question. Right?
My guess, my armchair speculation is they just have not read the damn book. They didn't take Philosophy for the People's advice. They have not read. Their own book.
like Angela Davis, was his dissertation student, but I mean the real, the rank and file, right? They've not read the damn book, right?
No, almost certainly not, right?
Right. And okay, and so kind of going back to the text a little bit here.
Yeah, sorry for the
no,
there, but
no, this is, look, but hey, the revolution will not be televised, my man.
It'll just be live streamed on YouTube.
That's the T-shirt. Is the revolution will be live streamed.
we got like 20 good T-shirt ideas at this point.
That'll be like our last live stream. Will be the revolution, right?
Perfect, yeah.
It's like it goes blank in the middle, right? Test pattern, right?
It's coming.
It's coming. No, and so he makes this point. He gets on talking about some actual empirical studies. Like he wants to talk about how like in social science itself has what should be the critical force has been infiltrated by this like Orwellian newspeak, right? Or this kind of operationalist understanding. And so he gives the example of someone who did an empirical study of elections, right? And Marcuse's problem with the study, and actually this is a very, very good point, right? He just says, well, this author said the 1952 election was this ideal of democratic practice because you had two equal parties. They had relatively equal funds. Like the voters turned out in great numbers, all this stuff. Okay. But Marcuse says, yeah, well, you're leaving aside like the whole history of elections that led up to that. Like you're leaving aside the kind of manipulative marketing elements that were involved in this. You're leaving aside the way education has been like loaded to like kind of prefer these two parties over against all other competing parties, right?
Mm-hmm.
And his point is like, okay, if what you mean by democratic is just simply what people we call Democrats do, well then yeah, it was a democratic election. But if you have a broader sense of it that includes the history leading up to it, okay, then you can't say this is so straightforwardly democratic.
Right.
Okay?
You've already begged the question in a really deep and significant way. Right?
Okay. And what he's doing here is a pretty deep Hegelian move. Okay. Because Hegel has this view that the concept of a thing is not just sort of the species genus definition of it in classical Aristotelian terms. It also includes the process whereby it is brought about. So like built into the definition of oak tree for Hegel is the process by which the acorn moves to the oak, right? But even more broadly, the evolutionary process that led to there being oak trees in the first place. Okay, so the history of the concept for Hegel is an essential feature of the concept itself. Okay, there are no static concepts. Concepts are always the products of a history, and the history is essential to it. Okay. And so what Marcuse is saying here in this Hegelian vein, it's all over this chapter, is if you want to say that's a democratic election, well, then you have to like include in your notion of democratic all these things that led up to it, right? And he's going to say, if you look at the history of the United States, you're going to see a lot of undemocratic stuff in there. Okay. All right. And those undemocratic things are inherent to the concept itself. So if slavery was part of the development of American democracy, then guess what? American democracy is essentially slavery. This is sounding familiar now, right? Okay, if sexism was part of it, right? Then sexism of the development, of a moment in the development, then sexism is built into it.
Right.
Okay, now, this is not actually Hegel's view, like he's gone Marxist here, but that notion of development is the Hegelian view, right?
Right.
And so on this Marxist view, right, if indeed like the causal evolutionary process includes these unsavory things like racism or sexism or whatever, right, homophobia, whatever, right, then that is baked into the very cake of the concept. Right? Okay, and so it's not like what he has in mind is this, oh, what we need is kind of like a Thomistic realism that sees the integrity of the concept for itself. No, what you need is a kind of like Marxist understanding of concepts as developments, wherein the ugliest parts of their history are intrinsic features of them. Okay.
Yeah.
And this is why, right? Like the Constitution's got to go, right? This is why, all of our institutions have to go.
And that's right. And this is critical because they are not just intrinsic features, they are essential features, right? So to get away from them means that you have to get rid of the thing altogether.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, exactly. So
right.
So
there is no America that isn't intrinsically racist if you accept this broadly Marxist conceptual view of America. And so in as much as you have to get rid of racism, you do have to get rid of America.
The whole thing,
right?
Because if racism was part of the development, like you couldn't have the concept emerge from a process and then somehow be different from it.
Right.
Okay. Now, I actually think like Hegel would say yes, you can, and that's his whole notion of sublation and overcoming.
Of course, right.
But what, or like for actually the notion of forgiveness of this is very big in Hegel, right? But what the more radical Marxist strain is saying is no, the development is inherent in it, and if the development was immoral, then the whole situation is immoral. forever.
Right. There's a very like, I don't want to. Yeah, I guess it is deterministic in a sense, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Like
At a conceptual level.
Yeah, at a conceptual, it's conceptually deterministic. Yeah, that's a good way to put it.
And so I think that is okay. That's one of the very first thing. There's two things in this book that I fundamentally disagree with. Is that liberation means just unconstrained, Woodstock, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, especially sexual
barn orgies, right? Yeah,
barn orgies, yeah, right. And this notion here that somehow, if you have something unsavory in the development of a concept, then that is there are no accidental stages in the development of a conceptual truth, right?
That's right.
And I think that's a dangerous idea, and that's why we are destroying our own history.
It's a false and dangerous idea.
It's false and dangerous.
Yeah, that's great. That's great to pull that out though, because that we can see, we can almost draw a straight line to modern leftist ideology.
This might be the
and this is why the statues of Jefferson have to go, right? So so like I guess
because they're symbols of American democracy.
Right.
American democracy has to go because if it has any flaw in its history, it is essentially flawed.
Right. So that's why it's not, the slippery slope is a water slide, right? So a lot of people who are saying, look, you let them tear down these statues over here, then like it's only a matter of time till Jefferson and these guys go. They might not have understood why that's the case. But once you read Marcuse, you can see why they were right, even if they don't even know what the connections are, according to this particular logic, right? If you're going to follow this through, then you really need the full Maoist revolution, right? This is the Maoist revolution. You have to get rid of all the olds, right? All the old customs, all the old statues, all the old religions, because why?
You'll have to have something of a great reset.
Right, because because they were all essential in the development. They weren't contingent accidents or nothing that could be escaped from or transcendent. It all has to go, right?
Because on this view, humanity is its history. There is no stable, real humanity. Okay, so you can't say our history was contingent to what we really are, right? We are constituted by our history, right?
Right.
And especially in the Marxist materialist version, there is no transcendence of history.
That's exactly right. There is. So it seems like Marcuse is keeping with that deterministic strain, despite his other critiques.
Yes.
Right.
Yes. I mean, his critiques of Marx are internecine, right? It's not a rejection of dialectical materialism.
Right. Yeah. But he does hold on to the deterministic aspects. Right.
Yeah.
Which is at least broadly inconsistent with some of his other commitments. But
I would even say that not even deterministic. It's historicist. Is that there is no fact of what humanity is outside of the history that it has followed to get to where it is.
Sure. Right.
You see what I mean? Humanity just is, like the way Nietzsche would put it, is humanity is a rope stretched between poles. Okay, now, but for like the Marxists, I mean, these are different people, right? But like we're just the process of coming to this end of history, right?
Yeah.
So you can't say, well, the slavery, that's not really us, right? We've thought better of it. No, that is you, because you are your history. That's it. That's all.
Whereas an Aristotelian could say, look, what we are essentially a rational, dependent social animals, blah, blah, blah. And contingently in our history, we did engage in these abominations, but they are not essentially us. We can transcend it.
Exactly. Right? And I think even a Hegelian can say, that was a stage, and maybe we had to go through that stage, but we can now see it was rotten and we've transcended it. Right.
Yeah.
Right. Because we are ultimately kind of a spiritual being that, gets a vote in what it is. Right. And we'll vote ourselves out of being racist. Right?
And this is a really, I'm glad you highlighted this, because this is a fundamental difference.
This is it. This is the thing. This is it.
And, obviously you see what side Jim and I come down on, but you got to understand this if you want to understand the modern political left. Now, the sneaky thing about the left is they either don't, again, they didn't either read their damn book, or they're just not being upfront about what their intentions are. But as we know, a lot of them are utilitarian, so they're not necessarily burdened by certain scruples that other people are, right? As part of the project, it might just involve not being upfront about what your intentions are, right?
Yeah. No, I mean, I think, you have to out-cunning the cunning of reason, right? Yeah.
Awesome. Can we take a few comments and questions then?
Definitely. Yeah, no, I feel like we hit this, man. We hit this.
Yeah, that was fantastic. All right, questions, comments.
Hey, the man does not want you to hear this either,
dude. This is getting canceled soon, so just make sure you guys share this so we
download these episodes, friends.
Download it, share it, help the cancellation occur sooner rather than later, so Jim can get back to more seemly recreations. Yeah, chest feeding persons. Yeah, isn't that another interesting manipulation?
Yeah, right. My favorite one was non-prostate persons, I heard.
Dude, I mean, heaven help me. I mean, here's Brendan's comment. How would you attempt to reform the language in our culture? I'm going to let Jim answer this. I will say one thing. The first thing I do is I will never call a man a woman, right? And I think we all have to choose a hill to die on.
Yep.
And the first thing to understand is that the manipulation game is a manipulation of language. So I think just across the board, you just have to refuse to participate. I refuse to participate in these language games. As for reform, I don't know from there, but I think the first step is refusing to play the language game according to the rules that they're trying to set. Jim, your thoughts? Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think you have to insist on speaking a historically significant tongue, right? Not a new invention, right? Do you know what I mean? And I know that will increasingly be difficult, right? But I also think you cannot just ignore truths, right? Like you cannot speak lies, right? Just can't do it.
You can't do it. Yeah, it's immoral. And look, reality wins at the end of the day. So it's just a matter of how much damage is going to be done in the meantime. And unfortunately, we know a ton of damage can be done. The other thing is I'm not, I'm not a cultural or political determinist. Jim, I'm curious your thoughts on this, because obviously culture influences politics, but politics influences culture too. So I would be, in terms of reform, like, I would be perfectly fine. Like, I'm not against cancellations per se, right? I'm not. I think there are some things that should be canceled. I just think that my idea of what should be canceled is going to be very different than the person on the modern political left.
Yeah.
I'm not against censorship per se. As a general rule, I think it's probably something we shouldn't implement prudentially. But for me, there are lines where censorship cancellation becomes appropriate. Like I don't see any reason to have Satanism in America, right? I'm actually.
Can we all agree on like snuff films?
Yeah, like snuff. Yeah, like exactly. Like I'm 100% fine with just banning that. I'm probably increasingly strongly on the just ban pornography camp as well. Just such a pernicious thing, such a pernicious industry, the sex slavery, all of that. So I just want to be clear, like we critique cancel culture, but in some sense, like I've got my own idea of things I'd want to cancel at the same time, right?
Yeah.
And same thing, like, hey man, if we could get some laws on the book to say like, sorry, we're just not going to play these games of calling a man a woman anymore.
I guess I want to make a distinction between like kind of censorship or like public decency standards and cancel culture, right? So, I mean, cancel culture, the way I think of it is it's targeting specifically ideas and people's ability to like be recognized as humane, even if they express these ideas.
That's correct. Right? That's a good
distinction. You know what I mean? It's like cancel culture. It seems to be. It's not just like, hey, if you show a piece of art that's debasing, we're going to like kick you off Twitter or whatever. It's that if you will claim to accept certain ideas, right, or even not accept certain ideas, then you are no longer worthy of a public voice, right? I think that's a very different thing, right? It's like it's a claim on. And if we can find at any point in your life you thought this, right, or anything you said could be construed this way, you're canceled, right? So it's like it's this claim on the inner individual, right? You know what I mean? It's a kind of level of thought police application of this, right? That it's not even just whether or not what you do is vile and debasing, it's going to undermine other people's well-being or something like that. It's that you're a certain kind of individual internally that has no right to speak. I mean, that's a different thing. That's a very
I agree. I'm glad you drew those distinctions. Right. Spot on.
Yeah.
All right, let's see here. Georgie for the people. Yeah, Georgie, if you listen to this, my friend, we'd love to have you on to talk these gender issues. I haven't read the full paper yet, but at the beginning, he just takes to task all these journals like Nature for all their sophistries, and it's amazing and needed. So
and he's a postdoc.
Yeah, he's a postdoc. So this guy, look, he's going
Georgie 2024, man.
Yeah, Georgie 2024. I don't know who you are, man, but you are a man of honor. I can tell that right away. So good for
A
you,
real
brother.
man. Yeah.
Good for you. All right. Let's see
I
what
bet
else we
he
got
trains.
here. Andrew says, as somebody who's trying to become a California teacher in elementary education, this is true to an extent. I think he's talking about math being called racist.
Yeah.
But Andrew, man, you as well are a man of honor. Good for you for trying to fight
Andrew.
that good fight, man.
And
you
Andrew,
have our support and respect.
A loyal listener to the podcast, to the live stream here.
Yeah. Andrew has another comment. I've been moving through these waters for about 2 years now, but keep in mind that there are socially conservative areas in California, especially in the Central Valley. Yeah, that's my understanding. My understanding is California is heavily pocketed by strong, good-minded conservatives, Christians, Catholics, but of course, just certain ideologies have certain grips.
A lot of the guys that my son is close to the Marine Corps are Central Valley guys.
Right, but there's like just certain
Northern
ideological grips in key voting centers, as we know. So
hey, look, I mean, Bakersfield country music, that's that's deep red, right?
Right.
And also, there was a video I saw in the summer of 2020 of like a bunch of Antifa guys showing up at a Central Valley small town and like thinking they were going to be welcomed with open arms. And needless to say, that's not how it went.
Good.
It's not how it went.
Yeah. Lane says, we grew up worshiping Herbert Marcuse in San Mateo, California. My mom was obsessed. Yeah.
Better that than like growing up with like Dancing for the Stars, right?
Mm-hmm.
Sure, you know what I mean? Like, at least you grew up in a household of ideas. I mean, I think I would rather have my kids weaned on Marcuse than like a silly and vapid pop culture, right?
So that's a good point. I want to emphasize again, like there's a number of things that we do disagree with, and we'll give our summary overview thoughts of Marcuse at the end. But I hope the impression so far is that we're trying to be intellectually serious. We're doing our homework. We're reading the book, and we're giving the man points where fair points are earned, right? And we're saying like, look, these are good points, these are good critiques, and we can maybe even learn something from some aspects of this book.
I think like why we did this. Like I urge us to do this book because this is one of the canonical texts of my youth, right? And I still agree with it more than I disagree with it.
Yeah.
And like I really do. I mean,
in terms of like quantity, right?
Yeah. I mean, I you know what I mean? In his fundamental critique of like contemporary societies, I agree with a great deal of this, right? Mm-hmm. But that doesn't like there's that 10% I don't agree with is like a pretty potent 10%.
It's a very fundamental difference.
And I think this just really in many ways exposes though how all of these these keyboard warriors talking about critical theory, this, that, they don't really understand what they're talking about. Right.
Yeah, right. Exactly. All right. Very good. Brendan says, I heard about critical theory way before I heard about Marcuse. That's pretty wild. Yeah, I mean, that's not uncommon, right? Yeah. I guarantee that that's probably the case for most people these days, right? I guess it depends where you hear about critical theory from. If you hear about it from social media these days, almost certainly you're not going to hear about it from Marcuse first, right? Mm-hmm. Let's see here. Any questions? I see lots of comments.
Let's see here. I don't see any questions.
Let's highlight Andrew's comment here. As it relates to race, though, I do think that there are interesting questions that McIntyre Thomas, along with other classically oriented metaphysicians and ethicists, ought to answer. For instance, it's race an authentic aspect of our anthropology, or is it an aberration of modernity? I don't think I'm reading that right. If it is the latter, aren't we to assume an eliminativist position? In other words, should we get rid of the notion of race as a biologically and socially constructed notion? Oh, okay.
So I don't know the answer to this, but I'll say this is when I was at Kent State getting my master's, gosh, I'm forgetting the professor's name now. It'll come to me. One of the most interesting courses I had in graduate school was on the metaphysics of race. And, like looking at race realism versus race nominalism. And it was a fascinating course, right? I actually wrote a paper on intertwine and indeterminacy and race, right?
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, and so I don't know. I think those are. I think Andrew, you're right. These are very, very interesting questions of like what sense, if any, can there be made of race metaphysically, right? Is and can we separate race from ethnicity? Can we separate race from culture? Can we? You know what I mean? Because that becomes worrisome. Because if indeed those are racist notions, but we still need culture and ethnicity to like make sense of a world for us. Like we're kind of up the creek now, right? And all that. I mean, so I don't know the answers to these. These are questions I think are very worth thinking about, though. Yeah.
I'm trying to think of some modern Thomists who have done or are doing work in this area. I know Christopher Tomaszewski just did a presentation or paper on this particular topic. So maybe I'll reach out to him. I think it's on the metaphysics of racism, but I imagine he would have dove into some of these topics. Maybe I'll reach out to him and see.
I remember this summer, I was going back more than 20 years ago for me, but I remember one of the interesting authors was a guy named Anthony Appiah, who was an African-American studies guy, but like a really sharp philosopher. And he defended a kind of race nominalism, right?
Sure.
It was pretty interesting, yeah.
Well, that is a topic for a future discussion.
Yeah,
I think so. And I think great conversation today, Jim. Really enjoyed this one. This was a lot of fun. When I was reading through this chapter, I'm like, oh, because Jim said ahead of time that I would enjoy this one, and you were right. You were right.
Exactly right. But I do want to emphasize to Lane. I mean, I know there's probably a downside being raised by like critical theorists, right? But I think to having grown up in a household of ideas that even bad ideas is better than a vapid popular culture.
100%. Yeah.
Right. 100%.
All right, gentle listeners, help us get canceled. Please like, share, subscribe, email this around, post it on the social medias. And we got some cool stuff coming up. We're going to do an intro to philosophy of mind here with Jim probably pretty soon. Yeah. We've got the Principles of Nature series with Gavin. And we got another former professional wrestler coming on again.
Pro wrestler? We'll probably do Freaky Friday this week, I assume.
Yeah, we'll do Freaky Friday this week. So, we like to mix it up, keep it funky.
Yeah.
And
I wonder if are we going to end up doing like the last chapter of One Dimensional Man on Christmas Eve or something like that?
That would be an interesting juxtaposition, to be sure. So
all I want for Christmas is the revolution.
If the people want it.
People want it, right?
All right, good stuff. All right, guys.
We should maybe take requests for the Christmas Eve episode of Philosophy for the People.
I would love to do a Christmas Eve episode. If you're available, let's do it. That'd be cool. So let us know what you guys want.
Morning, yeah.
If you guys want to see on Christmas Eve, we'll be responsive to the people.
I mean, I would never claim at this point in the semester on air to basically be on Christmas break already.
Never.
No, I would not claim that.
But we'll catch you next time, folks. Adios.